Good afternoon, my name is Alfred. I'm a solicitor within our white collar crime and international protection department here at Gherson. Today I'm joined by Tom Cattee, the partner within the white collar crime team. Today we will be talking about what it means to be sanctioned in the UK. Tom, what does it mean to be placed under sanctions?
Yeah, well, I think we can first say that the consequences of being sanctioned are pretty devastating. Some of the high-level consequences are that you will find that all your assets have been frozen. So that will cover your bank account, property, shares, essentially any assets that you hold will be deemed to be frozen. Any financial institution, law firm, or other third party that holds your assets will have to freeze your assets, and they will be liable for anything that happens to your assets. So all in all, a person who is sanctioned will immediately face very severe, difficult, and to be frank, horrendous consequences.
So who can impose sanctions in the UK?
Essentially, it's a government minister in the Foreign Office who will impose the sanctions. In terms of ensuring that sanctions are complied with and enforcing any breaches of sanctions, that is down to HM Treasury.
In practice, what actually happens to your bank account in the event you're made subject to sanctions?
Your bank account will be frozen. You won't be able to access any funds in there. You won't be able to make any payments. You won't be able to receive any payments. And in fact, if the bank permits you to move those assets without a license, the bank will also be liable for sanctions offences. So there's a very strict onus on everybody to enforce the sanctions.
Great. And even in the event that UK sanctions are or UK payments are permitted by a licensing regime, does that immediately have the effect that the financial institution will make the payments that you are permitted to make?
In our experience, no. Financial institutions by nature are very risk averse when it comes to sanctions. I think partly because there's a government drive to how much they want to enforce these, but banks are even more risk averse. So even if you were to obtain a license, it doesn't necessarily mean that will immediately free everything up. The bank will want to do their own checks. Ultimately, it just becomes a massive bureaucratic headache, and nothing happens quickly, unfortunately, which again, coming back to individuals who've got day-to-day expenses that need to be paid, it can be incredibly frustrating.
Can sanctioned individuals travel to the UK?
Well, I think that depends on two things. First of all, if they're subject to a travel ban. Obviously, an individual who is sanctioned in the UK and subject to a travel ban cannot practically travel to the UK. If they're not subject to a travel ban, in theory, they could travel to the UK. However, if they are subject to an asset freeze, which will be very likely, they might find it very difficult to make payments to come to the UK.
How do you challenge or appeal sanctions?
That's pretty much the first question someone who is sanctioned will ask. How on earth do I get out of this situation? There's ultimately a staged process. The first step is to gather evidence and then make representations to the government minister that he or her was wrong to impose those sanctions. You then essentially force them to provide a response. That response might be, yes, we agree with you. More likely than not, it will be, no, we don't agree with you. In that situation, you've obviously got a written decision. You then take that decision before a court and ask a judge to come to the conclusion that the decision was wrong.
Can sanctions be lifted unilaterally?
I mean, technically, yes, if the situation which caused the minister to implement the sanctions in the first place changes, then in theory, sanctions could be lifted. However, it's a political decision. It's probably not in that many circumstances that will happen.
Are family members affected by sanctions?
Unfortunately, yes. Children might get removed out of schools. There's reputational reasons that can affect children, which mean that they could struggle for the rest of their life to access financial facilities. And there's all sorts of practical things that can happen that do have a much wider effect on families.
What's the difference between personal and corporate sanctions?
I mean, in a nutshell, personal sanctions are aimed at individuals. Corporate sanctions will be aimed at companies. If an individual owns and controls a company, then by virtue of that individual being sanctioned, the company will also be sanctioned as well.
And in practice, have you seen many instances of corporations surviving past sanctions?
I mean, it's hard to say at the moment because we're kind of in the thick of it. But I think what you can say with certainty is if a corporation is sanctioned, it has a devastating effect on that corporation in the short to medium term.
And even in the event that an entity is not based in the UK or doesn't do a huge amount of business with the UK, within the UK, can it have a knock-on effect on a corporation to be sanctioned, even if they're based in, for instance, the Far East?
Yes, if that corporation has a UK a nexus, a basis in the UK, then the sanctions will bite in relation to that UK nexus. So UK sanctions will be very much applicable to that organisation, and I would suggest they seek immediate legal advice on how they can act legally in those circumstances.
If you're in need of any legal advice, please don't hesitate to contact us.